Today, we're going to cover the conclusion of the Danish Crusades, the Christianization of the Danish lands, as well as its part in the Northern Crusades and the establishment of Denmark as a medieval great power. Sources used are listed in the description below. I'm Quillowing History, and this video is part of a series on the Northern Crusades that were carried out by Scandinavians. A link to the whole playlist can be found in the card in the top right corner of the screen. Be sure to watch the video on the conquest of Rügen if you haven't seen it already. Otherwise, stay tuned. Following the conquest of Rügen in 1168, King Valdemar I of Denmark took further measures to bolster his power in the southern Baltic Sea, as well as effectively deal with the threat from the Danish raiders once and for all. Many defensive towers were constructed all over the Danish shores, and the Danish navy was reorganized so that every fourth ship was assigned to be on guard against Danish pirates for as long as the season allowed. The Danes were by now no longer only patrolling their own waters, but also patrolled around the river mouths on the southern Baltic shores. When it came to the Danish fleet's own raids, King Valdemar's focus shifted eastward from the Aboright lands to the duchy of Pomerania, and between 1170 and 1172, several expeditions were launched, which culminated in the siege of the city of Stettin in the summer of 1172. The siege ended with the city surrendering to the Danes, who forced its rulers to renounce his loyalty to Pomerania and instead swear fealty to the Danish crown, as well as pay yearly tribute. That same autumn, following the success at Stettin, the Danish fleet returned home to find themselves an unpleasant surprise. In their absence, a large Aboright fleet had assembled and descended upon the Danish shores. Outside the island of Falster, the two fleets clashed, with the Danes emerging victorious. This victory effectively marked the conclusion of the conflict between Denmark and the Danish raiders, for after this battle, no new raiders dared to sail into Danish waters. By the turn of 1173, the balance of power had greatly shifted in the region in favor of King Valdemar, who now showed how little he feared his main competitor in the region, Duke Henry of Saxony, by raiding the Saxon-controlled region of Vagria, something the Duke were unable to do much about. Saxony was at this time an integrated part of the Holy Roman Empire, and the reason that Duke Henry had been able to develop his power base in northern Germany was because his liege, the Holy Roman Emperor Frederick Barbarossa, had left him alone. This, however, was about to change. By the mid-1170s, Frederick and Henry came into serious conflict with each other, due to Henry having refused to lend his armies to one of the emperor's military campaigns in northern Italy. When the campaign turned into a disaster, Emperor Frederick blamed the failures on Henry and declared that Saxony had grown too powerful at the expense of the empire. This resulted in Henry being stripped of his titles and forced to flee to England in 1180, leaving Denmark as one of the few relevant powers in the southern Baltic Sea. Valdemar, however, would not be around to enjoy this state of affairs for long. In 1182, the Danish king died of natural causes, ending an almost 25-year-long reign, during which Denmark had been turned from a disorganized backwater, plagued by internal conflicts, to a major player in the southern Baltic Sea. This legacy would be continued by his son Knud VI, who ascended the throne soon after his father's passing. Back in 1162, King Valdemar had officially acknowledged Denmark as a part of the Holy Roman Empire, even though this acknowledgement was not in much more than name. When Knud became king in 1182, the emperor sent him a letter demanding that the Danish king acknowledged him as his overlord the same way his father had done. By the recommendations of his father's old friend, Bishop Absalon, King Knud ignored this request, angering Emperor Frederick, who most likely would have invaded Denmark if he didn't have bigger problems to deal with elsewhere. Because of this, he ordered Duke Bugislav of Pomerania to attack Denmark, which the Duke agreed to do. Bugislav, who had been the sole ruler of Pomerania since his brother's passing in 1180, was cautious about challenging the Danish navy in open battle. To try to catch King Knud off guard, he sent a letter to the Danish king, informing him that he wanted to enter into negotiations over an alleged wrongdoing Knud's vassal Hjalmar of Rügen had inflicted on Pomerania several years prior, and asked for the king to work as a mediator. King Knud, not suspecting any ill intentions, agreed, and made preparations to set sail once a time and place for the negotiations had been agreed upon. Around the same time, many of the king's vessels set out on their own plundering expeditions east to Estonia, due to the conflicts with the Wends having died down. When many of the lords had left, Duke Bugislav dropped the charade and descended upon Rügen with a fleet of 500 ships. Upon being informed of this, King Knud desperately tried to assemble every ship available and sent out a fleet under the command of Bishop Absalon to stop the Pomeranians from invading the island. The two fleets clashed in a bay south of Rügen, with the Danes emerging victorious due to being able to launch a surprise attack on the Pomeranian fleet by taking advantage of a thick fog that lay over the water. Upon having his fleet destroyed, Duke Bugislav sent out peace envoys to try to end the war, but the envoys were ignored by Knud, who in 1185 gathered a fleet and attacked Pomerania. Bugislav, who was left without any support from the emperor, at first tried to fight back against the Danes, but eventually chose to surrender. An agreement was reached that Bugislav would remain as a ruler of Pomerania, on the condition that he abandon his allegiance to the Holy Roman Empire, to become a tributary vassal to the Danish crown. The surrender of Bugislav effectively concluded the Danish Crusades in the Wendish lands. Denmark's power in the region was now unchallenged, due to the Holy Roman Emperor having given up hope in controlling the political developments in the north, and as a result, the rest of the Wendish lands were incorporated as Christian lordships into the Danish sphere of influence, including former Saxon-controlled territories like Vagria. The old Wendish nobility were left in charge as Christian vassals of their former pagan lands. This way of governing through local intermediates was a more stable way of governing the Wendish tribes than by installing a Danish lord, since the Wends were more willing to be ruled by one of their own rather than by a foreigner, and thus less likely to rebel. Through this political development, the tribes in northern Germany over time came to convert to Christianity. While the Wendish Crusades were concluded, Denmark's religious conquests were far from over, and at the turn of the 13th century, the Danes looked east for new lands to raid and more people to incorporate into the Danish sphere of influence. Today, I hope you learned something new about the Northern Crusades, Danish history, as well as medieval history in general. Thanks for watching.